welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about all of the books that I read in July and my tentative hopeful TBR of August. I would say that this past July I have had quite a good reading month. I think this is the most books that I have read in the month so far this year, which is pretty shocking to me because I usually read a good bit of books, at least in my opinion, over summer since I'm out of school or I'm just doing 2 classes usually in the summer. But this year I think I just had so much going on with like moving, other like personal stuff, that really July was only like a good reading month for me. And I'm going to be starting my fall term on August 12th, so I only have like a week and a half left of just like some solid dedicated reading time. My summer classes ended actually 2 days ago, so I have like an actual summer about like 10 days before I start my fall term, and I will be taking 4 classes then. So I'm planning on really trying to just like maximize the amount of books that I read and dedicate a lot of time to reading within these last 10 days, because I know that when school starts I will miss all of this free time that I have right now dearly to read. So with that being said, I will get into the books that I'm hopefully wanting to read by the end of August. Hopefully I can get through, I would say, like half of these before my fall term starts. But first, let's talk about the books that I read in July first. The first book that I read in July is Just One Day by Gail Foreman. I talked about this book for the first time in my living alone little vlog diary thing. I was currently reading this at the time. I'm pretty sure I finished it in that vlog as well. This was a reread for me. I read this back in 2014 or 2015 when I was about 13 or 14 years old. I absolutely loved it then, and I came upon it in a used bookstore in my area a few weeks ago, and I just had the desire to, I guess, kind of like feel that nostalgia again of reading a book that I absolutely loved almost a decade ago. And so I read it. I loved it just as much this time. I think a lot of my love for it is just based off of the nostalgia that was brought up for me while reading this. I did talk about in my living alone diaries once I finished this that this book is split into 2 parts, and when I was 13 I loved part 1 more, but now at 22 I love part 2 more. So that's really interesting to see like how your reading tastes change as you get older. Also, I recognized a lot more of like the deeper topics that are talked about in this book with depression, and also there was like inclusivity that I was kind of shocked was being so freely talked about in 2014 when this was published. And it's just really cool to see that there were books out there that were focusing on mental health and everything from 2014. Absolutely loved this. Just to sum it up really quick, it's about a girl who goes on a European trip with her best friend over the summer before they enter college. They had just graduated from high school. They went to all different sites in Europe except for Paris. She really wanted to go to Paris on this trip, but it just didn't work out. She runs into a guy on their last night on the European leg, and he finds her the next day and is like, hey, I know you didn't get to go to Paris, I want to show you. And so the first part is over the course of just one day, kind of them falling in love, spending time in Paris. The first part was very slow, but the second part was just really sentimental and like emotional for me. I feel like I resonated with the character a lot, and I don't think I would have known that I was going to at 13 because she's 18 in this book, and when I was 18 I feel like I was kind of feeling the same way as her. So that's just like really cool that I read about something that kind of had to do with myself when I was younger and I didn't know it was coming yet. I don't know. Bottom line, I just really enjoyed it. It was very bittersweet. There's a second book to this called Just One Year that I'm planning on picking up in August or later on in the year, but 5 stars for this one. Absolutely love this book. Second book that I read in July is The Love of My Afterlife by Kirsty Greenwood. I have not heard that much discourse about this book on the book universe out here. I've seen a few people post about it. I got this in the buy 2 get 1 free Target book sale, I would say like 3 weeks ago, and sounded very interesting to me. I also like love the cover as well. It's about a girl who chokes on a burger by herself in her apartment and ends up going to the afterworld, and when she gets there she's like so confused. In a way it's like heaven in a sense, and while she's in heaven a guy shows up, and her mentor up in heaven is like, oh my god, that's your soulmate, and he's actually not supposed to be here, he's just in a coma right now, I'm gonna send him back down, but I will let you go back down to earth if you can find him and y'all kiss within 10 days and kind of like fall in love with each other. So she gets sent back down to heaven, and she is on a quest to find the guy that she met in the afterworld in heaven, and it's very whimsical. It's very, no, it was a little bit different than what I thought it was gonna be. I personally didn't love it. I liked it. I did find the main character very, very annoying and very unlikable. I think that that was kind of like purposeful and you were kind of meant to, but sometimes like I can vibe with characters that aren't meant to be likable, but this one I just couldn't. I did enjoy the side characters in this story quite a lot, and the love interest that came along as well. The silly like running journeys on her trying to like find this guy I did really enjoy, but just something didn't make me absolutely like eat this book up, I guess. The ending, the last like 50 pages did save the rating in a sense for me. I ended up giving this 3 stars, 3.25, somewhere like that. I wouldn't not recommend this. If you usually don't like unlikable characters, I guess that this book might not be for you, but it wasn't for me, but it could definitely be for someone else. I wouldn't not recommend it. It was just not my favorite of July. Now, the third book that I read in July is Everything I Know About Love by Dolly Alderton. This is definitely one of my favorite books of the year. It is certainly one of my favorite literary fiction memoirs I have ever read. There is a lot of love out there for this book, and I honestly don't know why I put it off for so long, but I did. I usually love books like this. I love books that people say are perfect to read in your 20s, as I am a 22-year-old. I didn't expect it to be so easy to read. I feel like memoirs and like literary fiction tend to read like in chunks. I can't sit down and read a good chunk of it in one sitting, but with this book I was able to. I have highlighted so much of this book, and even since I've read it, I've gone back and looked at what I've highlighted. It is just, I think, the perfect book to read in your 20s. It is about Dolly Alderton, and from when she was 20 to when she was 30, everything that she went through, from dates, friendships, ending relationships, family issues, the doom that happens when you hit your 20s of what am I doing? I don't feel like an adult. It made me feel very like, okay, so I'm not the only one that's feeling this way. It kind of comforted some of my fears, I guess, that I've had since I've been 20, and especially going into like my early 20s. And she was just kind of like, no one really knows what they're doing, and that's the joys of being in your 20s. So it definitely gets a lot deeper than that, and I can't even put into words what this book means to me and what it made me feel and see and did for me. If you're in your 20s, I highly recommend picking this up. Whether you're a guy or a girl, it doesn't matter. This is an amazing book to, I think, give you some comfort and peace of mind on, you don't have to have everything planned out. You don't have to have everything figured out right now. That is what your 20s are for. It is for mistakes. It is for new beginnings. It's for endings. And yeah. Amazing, amazing book. Now we are jumping into the books that I read in my 24-hour readathon. In the last video that I posted on here, the first one that I read was Local Woman Missing by Mary Kubica. This was the only thriller that I read this month, which is kind of surprising because I'm such a thriller girly, but it definitely was a good thriller to read this month. If this was the only one I was going to read, I'm completely fine with that. I gave this 4.25 stars. It is about a girl named Delilah who goes missing at the age of 6, and then she shows up 11 years later, And that's honestly all I really want to tell you. Personally, I like going into thrillers not really knowing much. I think that this is certainly one that the less you know, the better, the more it'll shock you and the plot twist will get you. It's very hard for me to find thrillers that genuinely I'm like, what? That shock me, and this one did it for me. I did kind of guess one of the plot twists. I just had an inkling about one of the characters in here from the start. But there wasn't just one plot twist in here. There was at least 2 or 3 that I can think of off the top of my head. If you have not read this book yet, I highly recommend doing so, especially if you haven't read that many thrillers before or ever. I think this is an amazing first thriller to get you into the thriller world. I read this in one sitting in literally 4 hours. I didn't say I gave this 4.25 stars. A very solid rating for a very good thriller. The next book that I read in the 24-hour readathon was Same Time Next Summer by Annabelle Monaghan. This was my first Annabelle Monaghan book I have ever read, and I am so happy I did. I loved this book so much. It almost reminded me of, well, actually, yeah, like it did. It reminded me of Happy Place a lot. I feel like there was similarities into the storyline and kind of the characters as well, a part of both stories. But this one is like just under 300 pages. It's a lot faster paced than Happy Place, but I don't want to like compare them too much because they're 2 completely different stories, but it just kind of gave me that vibe as well, and I think that is why I loved it so much, because I absolutely loved Happy Place. I absolutely loved this. This is about a girl who's engaged, and her and her fiance go and stay at her parents' beach house for about a week or so, and her childhood lover, first lover, teenage romance guy is staying in the house right next to hers. That is where they met. Their families own like separate little houses next to one another, and she hasn't seen him in a very long time, ever since like stuff went down in their lives and broke up. And it was just a very cute then and now, but also had a lot of heartfelt moments in it as well. It jumps back and forth between the past when they were kind of like falling in love and dating, and then now, and it's also a dual perspective. It shows her perspective and the guy's perspective, which I really like a lot in romance. I just absolutely love this book so much. I gave it 5 stars. I think about these characters all the time ever since I read it. I'm definitely going to pick up more of Annabelle's books in the future. Hopefully I can read them all by the end of summer. That's kind of like my goal. I've fallen in love with her writing and her characters, and yeah, I found a new author that I absolutely love. Third book that I read in the 24-hour readathon was The Bodyguard by Catherine Center. I picked this book up on a whim. I ended up reading it on my Kindle and absolutely flew through it. I have never read a Catherine Center book before. I don't know why, because I loved this book. I gave it 4 stars. I thought it was the perfect combination of like witty banter and also some like emotional character development growth like topics as well. I think there was a perfect balance between the both. I also haven't read that many closed door romances before, and this one really opened my eyes to honestly like how much better closed door romances are in a sense, because they focus so much more on the emotional attachment instead of the physical attachment between 2 characters. I absolutely love when there's both, but in a lot of the books nowadays I feel like it just completely jumps to physical attraction, and emotional attraction is so important, and so I like that this author really focuses on that. I am very interested in reading more from her. I really want to read Hello Stranger and the rom-commers. I have those 2 both on my shelf. So yeah, this one was a 4 to 4.25, something like that in between. Really enjoyed this one. Then the last book that I read in the 24-hour-thon was Big Swiss by Jen Began. This one was just, it's been a while since I've read it, but it was also still don't really know how to explain feelings about this. I ended up giving it like a 3.25 stars. I'm very like in between on my ratings this month. Usually I'm very like punctual, but this month I'm just kind of like I don't know. Anyways, this is about a girl who is a transcriber for a therapist, and she becomes very fascinated with one of the therapist client's stories and becomes kind of like obsessed with it. She ends up meeting her like unexpectedly out in public one day, and she signed an NDA to be a transcriber, so she can't let this girl know that she works for this girl's therapist. So she lies about her name, her age, what she does for work. They end up becoming best friends and also end up falling into an affair. It was just very odd. I like odd, weird books sometimes, but I think since I had been reading so much, this one would have been a lot better to read at the beginning of the readathon than at the end. I think I would have enjoyed it more. This took more brain power than the other books that I had read before this, so I think I was just mentally like drained, I guess. Still enjoyed it. I think that if I had read it at my own pace, if that makes sense, or with a fresher mind, I would have enjoyed it a little bit more, but it was still a pretty good book. And the last book that I read in July is The Maidens by Alex Michaelides. This is the second book that I've read by him. I've read The Fury. Surprisingly, I have not read The Silent Patient, but after reading this, I want to read The Silent Patient like immediately. I love this guy's writing so much. This one was definitely a lot more different than The Fury. They were both thrillers, but this one is kind of like dark academia mystery thriller to me. It took so many twists that I was not expecting. It is about a girl named Mariana, and she is a group counselor, a group therapist. She has a niece that goes to college at Cambridge University, and there's a girl that was her best friend that ends up being killed one night, and so Mariana goes to Cambridge to kind of comfort her niece because her niece has been through a lot, and she starts to kind of get suspicious of this professor that works at Cambridge, and he almost has like this cult-like following with his students, particularly a group of girls that are just like really obsessed with him in a sense, and she finds out that the girl that was killed that night was kind of a part of his culty thing as well, so she gets really suspicious of him. More people start dying on campus, and so she kind of takes it upon herself to figure out this murder, figure out who the killer is, and she bets all of her odds on this professor. This book was much different of a thriller than what I usually read because, like how I said, it has this like dark academia basis to it as well. It reminded me a lot of If We Were Villains. I absolutely loved that book. I gave that 5 stars, and I ended up giving this 5 stars as well. I don't want to say too much because, like how I said, I like to not say a lot about thrillers before people go into them. I think kind of what I covered is a good enough basis for if you're interested in reading it, definitely picking it up. I highly recommend you picking it up. It is, like how I said, very different from a lot of thrillers out there. I love this guy's writing so much. This was definitely a solid book for me to end the month of July off on reading. Now I just want to quickly go through some books that are on like an August hopefuls, tentative TBR kind of thing. Like how I've said many times, I'm really bad at sticking to TBRs, but I have a bunch of summer books that I really want to get through, especially before I start the school year. So with that being said, I really want to read The Summer of Broken Rules by K.L. Walter. I have had this book for like a year and a half now at this point, and I have not read it yet. And I don't know why I haven't picked it up. I haven't heard anything bad about it. I guess I just haven't like gravitated towards it. So this is one that is like a priority for me. Also, these 2 books, Every Summer After and Meet Me at the Lake by Carly Fortune. The third book, This Summer Will Be Different, just recently came out. I think that's the last one in this like companion series. I also haven't read these yet. I want to. I've heard good things about this one, not so good things about this one. one and then really good things about the last one. So just to wrap up kind of the summertime, I really need to read these. The next book that I'm hoping to get to is Lovers and Writers by Lily King. I always like to read at least one literary fiction memoir book each month, and so this is the one that I want to pick up in August. I don't know much about it. I just know that it is highly praised. Everyone in the literary fiction community loves this book, eats it up, loves it to death, that kind of thing, and I think it is like one of the baseline literary fiction books in the literary fiction world, and so I need to read it. Next up, I have Reckless by Elsie Silver. This is the third book in the Chestnut Spring series. I have read Flawless and Heartless. I loved Flawless. I really loved Heartless. I have been loving cowboy romances this summer, especially this series, and so I usually read like one every month. I don't know why I can't just binge a series at one time, but I guess kind of like to take my time with them, especially since these are like companion novels in a sense. So this is the next one I need to read. I've heard that this is some people's least favorite, so maybe that's why I've been putting it off. Heartless, a lot of people say is their favorite, and so far it's mine. I can attest that book is so good. I love the main characters in that book so much, but this one also sounds really good. It's about Theo, and he is a bull rider, and you know, it's a cowboy romance. There's gonna be love, there's gonna be rodeos, everything that we all love in cowboy romances. So this is the next one on the TBR. The last book that I want to mention for my August hopeful TBR is Nora Goes Off Script by Annabelle Monaghan. I talked about this, that I wanted to read more of her books, especially this summer. I have Summer Romance by her coming in the mail as we speak. I think it should get here today. This is the next one that I have physically, and I really want to read it. I've heard amazing things about this one as well. I feel like everyone who has read Annabelle Monaghan is a fan of hers, and I am definitely seeing the hype now that I've been reading her books, so this one is on my TBR as well. Those are all the books that I read in July and all the books that I am hopefully, fingers crossed, going to read in August. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. I have been really on my game of posting on here, and I have a lot of fun YouTube videos planned out that I will be posting in the near future, so if you don't want to miss out on those, definitely subscribe to my channel. I would also love to know your favorite book that you read in July, or any of the books that you are wanting to read in August. If you have any on your list or you want to share some of your favorites, let me know down below, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye!